You never know when they're going to pull the tarp off, and here we are. Hello, my name is Karen McGuire. I'm the superintendent here at Tri-County. We appreciate your coming out on this evening to our presentation for the building project. With me tonight, I have members of our school committee from our 11 towns. We also have the members of our school building committee, and then we have representatives from Consigli, from DRA, which is our OPM, and Dore and Whittier, our OPM, and DRA, our architects, who are going to go through a slideshow with you tonight. We also have our bond counsel, Lynn, here from Unibank, who will be talking about what the cost impacts will look like by community, since we have those numbers now. This is the end of my second year here as superintendent, and since the day I walked in the door, people were saying to me, what's the number? So today we have the number, so roughly what we think it's going to be. So at any rate, without any further ado, again, I apologize for the mix-up. We checked it at 4 o'clock before our last meeting, and everything worked fine then, but I don't know, the mice or something. So I'll turn it over to you, to Christina or to Carl. All right, thank you. Now we have a,
You go first, I can go first. Okay.
so we have a little gizmo here for you, Trip. Nope.
There we go. That's perfect.
Okay, there we are. Okay.
I'm going to give it to Carl because I might do something wrong with that. Okay, thank you very much, Karen. My name's Trip Elmore. I'm with Dore and Whittier, and have been hired as the OPM, as the first consultant hired for this project as it was accepted by the MSBA. We have, as you can see by this time graph here, or timeline, is we have proceeded through several of the steps that the MSBA prescribes that we must follow in order to be part of their grant funding program. We have gone through the eligibility stage. We've assembled the project team of the OPM, the designer, and now we have the constructor, Consigli, on board. We've looked at the feasibility study, and what's key about this is that the MSBA process says you have to understand what your education is first and foremost. Then you have to figure out what solutions meet that educational need for the communities that are supporting this. It's not a process where put a number out there and then do whatever you can for that number. It's all education-based at the beginning. And fundamentally, that's the right way to look at a facility that's going to be around for 50 years. And so following that step, we did that in feasibility. And as you may have seen in other public meetings you might have attended, we've gone step by step with multiple options that meet that educational need, narrow those down to 3 options that would meet that educational need, select one that you would then further study where you can actually put a schedule together and you can actually put a number together. And based on more information for that one option, you then would go to the MSBA for their approval and then go to the community for their support. And if those 2 things happen, the project proceeds into what would be detailed design and a lot more understanding of what goes into the building and how it's going to be scheduled and when the students can move in. So right now we are coming to the conclusion of step number 4, which is the schematic design. And so I am now going to turn it over to the architect to show some of the summary level aspects of this project that have been designed over the last 6 months in the schematic design process. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Carl Franceschi from DRA.
Thanks, Trip. Oops, which one are we going here? Yeah, there we go. I've got it. So thanks very much. Thanks for your patience and your interest in this project. As Trip mentioned, we're the architects for the project, and we started off both helping the school develop that education plan, but we also were evaluating existing conditions because we had no preconception as to whether this would be an addition renovation of the existing school or an entirely new building. Some of the things that we found, those who are familiar with the building maybe already understood, but there certainly were certain issues here from a facilities point of view that need addressing, both inside and outside of the school, particularly the infrastructure of the building, some of the ongoing issues they've had with plumbing pipes and other infrastructure that very costly and difficult to address. But in the end, after going through that series of options that Tripp mentioned in the feasibility study, we did land on the preferred option being new construction. The cost difference between new construction and the other options was actually minimal. They were basically in the same order of magnitude, and the value of the new construction project, for a lot of reasons, made more sense, and the elimination of disruption of trying to do an addition or a renovation or an occupied building was also a big factor too. So this is a rendering of the proposed new school. It will be located kind of behind this existing building where the teacher parking lot is now and the solar panel array. So it can be built on a portion of the site that while the existing school stays in operation. We will relocate the teacher parking to an area of the site. The baseball field may be lost during the construction period to parking, but otherwise is minimal disruption to the ongoing operations of the school. And the new driveway there coming up from the bottom of the slide is basically the driveway that you drove up tonight, just continuing on in the same alignment, so just to get oriented as to where the school is. So the existing school, once it's removed, will become a parking lot in front of the new school there. So this is the front elevation of the building. And then as you come inside the building, one of the features of the building is the way it's organized in kind of reflection of the education plan. There is a student commons. It functioned as not only the cafeteria, but it is kind of the student hangout spot before school, after school. It obviously functions as a cafeteria, but also as a lobby because it's adjacent to the gym, it's adjacent to the auditorium. It is a two-story space with a lot of natural light in it. Here's another view of it from the second floor looking down. The gym and auditorium are to the right in this rendering, and there's a courtyard where the natural light is coming in from the left. Another space we just want to share, the rendering of the Library Media Center, also on the front of the building, getting a lot of natural light in a very flexible space with both open sort of collaborative areas, but also private student study rooms in there as well. One of the other features of the way the building is laid out is that the public areas of the building, like the restaurant and the cosmetology salon that are open to the public, you may be familiar with that, will have a more direct entrance into those spaces than they do today. This is a rendering of the restaurant that the culinary arts students will support. You can see it has access to an outdoor patio too, so in good weather there could be some tables out there, but it's right on the front of the building as well, very accessible directly and safely from customer parking. And one of the other features in the building, the school wanted an auditorium, but as we thought about it, we wanted to make it as useful and flexible a space as possible. So unlike this space, which one, it's a little bit small for the size of the school, but two, it's not very flexible. It has fixed seats, and you could do presentations here on the stage, but that's about it in a sense. We thought that having a larger space but more flexible space makes more sense for Tri-County in the long run. So what we're showing is these are auditorium-style seats, like what you're sitting in now, but they're arranged on a substructure much like gymnasium bleachers. So they can be retracted, and then you'd end up with a flat floor that becomes multi-purpose. So this is when the seats are retracted. You now have a flat floor. It could be a robotics competition. Could even be an auxiliary gym station. You could move in wrestling mats and have practice and wrestling meets in here. It is a two-story space with a balcony around it. So it works for a variety of functions. Here's a layout of the building. The colors show different materials because we do need to develop a very good cost estimate at this time, so we wanted to be detailed about the materials being used for the estimator's purposes. But the plan, you can see, is basically a courtyard. That rectangle in the center is open to the sky. It's an outdoor courtyard there. The main entrance is at the lower left, right immediately adjacent to the administration area for security purposes and supervision. But the customer entrance is on the right there, that other angled entrance, right directly into the culinary arts restaurant and the cosmetology salon. And the building is organized basically with all the academic portions on the right-hand portion of the plan around the courtyard, and the public areas of assembly and events are on the left-hand portion around the student commons. So that's how we mentioned the student commons acts as the lobby to both the auditorium and the gymnasium, which is here on the second floor, easily accessed from a main stair, that stair that the rendering was showing you from. And again, the shops and the classrooms wrap around three sides of the courtyard. They, again, are reflective of the education plan, which asked for those classrooms to be in close proximity to the career tech shops. And also the shops are organized in clusters so that, for instance, the health services career areas are located together and the communication areas are located together. And on the first floor, the construction shops are together and the transportation shops are together. So that's really the opportunity that a new building offered, as opposed to trying to reconfigure this renovation project. In a new school, we could very closely react to the education plan. There is a third floor to the building on the front side, which is primarily classrooms and some support spaces, which again could be a freshman academy up there. They do have a slightly different schedule. That first semester they occupy the school, and so the building reflects that, and also is organized in a more compact fashion than the current school is organized. Right now it's kind of a sprawling 1- and 2-story building. This makes a more compact footprint, which actually is more efficient use of the site. So to total all that up, where we stand, once we developed these schematic plans, we shared them with 2 independent professional cost estimators to first of all develop the construction cost for the project in fairly good detail at this point. And that's kind of the hard cost of bricks and mortar and so forth. And we went through a value engineering process to bring that project in line with what we had estimated originally back at the conceptual stage and what we think is reasonable and appropriate for what the school deserves, but what also, understanding that we want to be as economical as possible here. And so the value engineering was factored into that construction cost to bring it down, and the number's not quite there, 230 million or so. And then, as we say, that's the hard cost, but there are things like fees and furniture and equipment and contingencies that need to be factored in to figure the total project cost, which is really a turnkey cost. It includes, as I say, the furniture and equipment so that you can move in on day one, and all of the services necessary, the moving, the design, the management, and so forth, brings it to 283 million. And again, that's the budget that would be submitted to the state as part of this schematic design submission, which ultimately becomes kind of the contract between the district and the state and becomes the upper limit to the project. The MSBA, the School Building Authority's grant is based on that number and will not change. Even if costs go up in the marketplace or if costs go down, they do look at that. But if costs were to go up down the line, the MSBA grant remains the same. And so we work very hard to keep that project limit throughout the entire project. We have, a value engineering process at each step of the way when we do cost estimates later on to keep that and keep the district share of that obviously constant. So we have with us tonight a bonding council expert here can explain how the district share is paid for and financed.
I get the best part. Do you want to do the slides? Did you? Okay, that'd be great. Well, good evening. My name is Lynn Foster Welsh. I work for Unibank Fiscal Advisory Services. I recognize some of you guys in the back, some of my clients. Unibank Fiscal Advisory, I'll just give a very brief of who we are. We're actually the largest independent municipal advisor in New England. We service over 341 cities, towns, school districts, and special districts. We're located in Northbridge, Massachusetts. We have extensive knowledge and experience with financing school projects, vocational school projects. Lately have been the financing for the beautiful school in Lincoln, the Minuteman Vocational School. Bristol Plymouth, as you may have heard in the paper, they're a $300 million school that has been approved and is now in the process of being built. Assabet Valley, Old Colony, Greater Fall River, just to name a few. We also provide the advisory services to some of the member towns that are included in the district. Myself, I have over 35 years experience in financial advisory. A lot of the school financings that our firm has done, I have been part of those financing. So I am with the district to provide, obviously the most important thing, the advice on the structure, timing of either short-term notes and permanent financing into the bond market. So on the top level here, on the school construction financing, just a couple of nuances in general about financing schools funded by the MSBA grant program. They're usually for 30 years. You can't exceed 30 years per the statute. The statute is 70B, and that's the MSBA grant-funded statute for school projects. The amortization of bonds will either do level principal or level debt. Chances are we'll be doing right now a 30-year level debt program, meaning that the principal and interest as throughout the life of the bonds will stay fairly constant, okay? And that's a way that the towns can manage the debt service that they're assessed, and also it's a constant, if you will, for the taxpayers on their impact. It's a little fluid because assessed valuation in school enrollments changed, but over years there's not a huge fluctuation in that. The other nuance of bonds is, and the bond issuance is bond premiums. So we're talking about a district share of approximately $200 million. And I would envision that we're not going to issue $200 million all at once. We're going to look at the cash flows, obviously the market environment that we're in, and but bond premiums. Underwriters who buy municipal bonds offer a premium on the day of the sale. Okay, and the premium basically is a cash up front. It would be to the district. And the state law says any premium that you received after you pay the cost of issuance shall be applied to reduce the par amount of the bonds. So any issuance that we do, more than likely, there'll be a premium from the underwriter. So the day of that sale, we'll be able to reduce the bond size and therefore reduce the debt service impact. In the process, top level is obviously we'll be reviewing the cash flow, constant communication with the district to see what is the best advantage to the district in the market, whether we issue short-term notes, which are called bond anticipation notes, or whether when we go into the bond market. And again, I think if you haven't turned the TV on lately, market conditions, if you don't know, are quite volatile. With the Fed raising rates as much as they have in the last 2 years, has really kind of turned the issuance of bonds or notes kind of in a 180, if you will, because we're in an inverted yield curve where short-term paper is more expensive than going out for a 30-year bond. Just to give you an example of that, I sold an issue, short-term issue that's up to 1 year, and the net interest rate on a 1-year paper was almost 5%. The town of Concord went out roughly the same time on a 30-year bond, and their net interest cost, or average cost to borrow, was a 334. So that's the market that we're in now. So we can go to the next. So before I show, we've discussed the 200 million here. I put together on my next slide that comes after this the impact to the member towns based on these assumptions, okay? That we will likelihood have a multiple issuance of bonds until we permanently finance the project. We won't issue the final bond for the district until the MSBA final audit is completed. So that way we know exactly what the district share is. We certainly don't want to borrow any money that will be grant funded by the MSBA. My analysis is based on the member towns' 2023 assessed valuations. Obviously, that's the latest valuations that we have to work with. In those valuation and in the impact, I have taken into consideration some of the member towns do have split tax rates, so this is just the residential impact that you're going to see. And in my crystal ball, I used an estimate of a 4.5%, which is conservative right now. Again, I don't know if anybody can tell me here or anywhere whether rates are going to go up or down by the time we get into bond financing. But I certainly wanted to be a little bit more conservative in my estimate and my coupon rate. I'm not sure you can see this, and I know Dan, the town, I've just lost the back half, and I see the this slide here, I know it's hard to see, but Dan does have a breakout, even more detailed. I used, as for quick analysis, the impact of a homeowner on 100,000 value of home. Obviously, that's an easy multiplier for somebody to plug those numbers in. And Dan, I don't know what, you know. Oh, okay, so, all right, I'll give you a couple examples. I'll use, all right, so for Franklin, all right, and again, this is a very fluid, these are very fluid numbers. It's not guaranteed. As I've said to the district, this is, you know, if it was a dartboard, we're not right in the middle, but we are on the board. And again, as I told you, there's a lot of variables that go into these numbers, but this is what we're working with today with the best knowledge that we have. So Franklin, for instance, Franklin would be looking at $28.77 per 100,000 home value. So if you want to do the multiplication on that, a year. Okay. Medway, I know Medway's here. Oh, you probably don't want to know yours. About $36 per thousand, 100,000.
So the more important number, what is the bottom line number for the town? Not by household, but for the town. What is our number? Is it $1 million?
I believe Dan has that sheet for you. Okay. North Attleboro, I don't see Mike, but he's about 56.86 per 100,000, just based on that the analysis. It's pardon me. No, I'm talking. This is an average. This isn't per student. This is. It's 200. Yeah, It's the numbers, and like I said, I'm trying to explain the interest rates are subject to change, enrollments, the assessed valuations. I mean, we don't see wide swings usually year to year on these numbers. So I'm working with what I have now, the assumption of the rate environment, and as again, it's a fluid process. It's going to depend on cash flow. And some other various considerations, which if you don't want me to read any more of these, we can just go to the next slide, which is somewhat busy, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Dora and Whittier was afraid that I was going to go through each one of those, and they were going to fall asleep. But I do want, part of the considerations, and I think this is good for my town officials who are here tonight too, is when we do look at that cash flow, again, with all the other variables that we are talking about, there is arbitrage considerations. And in the market that we're in today, we are in a very positive arbitrage, which means that you can go out in the bond market and borrow for a lower bond yield and then turn that around and invest those unexpended proceeds from the bond into a higher investment until those invoices need to be paid. That's not such a bad thing, but the IRS tells you that since we've given you the luxury of being a tax-exempt entity and you get the benefit of tax-exempt rates, that you can't go out and really burn and earn money off of that. Unless they'll allow you to do it, but you have to spend the proceeds in an allotted, specified time by the IRS. So that is just this box here, which gives you your 4 tranches that you have to meet. And the first one is bond proceeds have to be expended, that borrowed proceeds, 10% of those proceeds have to be expended within 6 months. The district will have to keep good record keeping on that, because if you don't hit the first tranche there, the 10%, you have to report it to the IRS that you've basically, here it is, I borrowed at this and I've invested at this, I've made some money off of this project. You just have to report it. But what happens is once you knock on the IRS's door and they open it and let you in, they're going to come back out and say, well, we just want to come in and see if you've actually done your calculations right. So we try to advise and look at the cash flow to meet those considerations. Again, just a quick down and dirty of some of the variables that we have to think about. And then the rest of this messy stuff is all the stuff that the district has to consider and all the steps they have to go through to put their either notes or bonds in the market. Don't shoot the messenger. But that's, I'll ask any questions that any of Medway.
There were 2 options for the bond.
Yes.
Paying the bond off.
Mm-hmm.
I call it straight line, where every year it's $1 million, $1 million, or it's $1.5 million, $1.4 million, Which option are you going with?
Level debt service. So you're going to see principal and interest. As the principal, level debt service, you'll have a smaller principal payment, but the interest will be higher, okay? And it just goes down the line like that. So it's consistent debt service.
So for 30 years, it's going to be a level, no?
Straight across, yep, straight across.
This is all very new to me. I had kind of probably misunderstood that at some point, all of a sudden, we do the 280 million or the 200 million, and then that's when it starts hitting the towns. It sounds like what you're saying is 1 year we might get a little bit of charge to the towns, a little bit of capital assessment, next year a little bit more, next year a little bit more. Is that, so it's more that way, a step kind of thing?
I envision for the amount for the term of this project, keeping all those variables in mind, that we will have multiple issuances of bonds, maybe 2 or 3. We definitely will have to hold out some part of the project until the MSBA audit is complete. So we absolutely will know what the district share is for that final issuance. But as we talked about today, we're in this market where 2 years ago, if you were building, in this you know, in this environment and building a school construction, the cost of funds were close to zero. And so people were just issuing short-term notes, you know, because the interest, it was so minimal. It was basically free money. We are totally on the opposite side of that scenario now. As I said before, it's almost more advantageous to hit the bond market first. But again, we don't have a set plan in place. It's going to be, we're going to see that cash flow, see what makes sense, see where we are in the market. Obviously, keeping in mind the timing of the impact on the member communities as well. So there's a lot of things to consider and talk about. Sir?
When does the bond issuance start? And when do towns start being obligated?
Again, we have not determined that yet. It's fluid. It's maybe 26 or 20, fiscal 26 or 27. Yeah.
It's over by 2056, 2057.
Yeah, there. Is that, did I misspeak? Okay, okay.
So if the town reevaluates, I don't know if that'll, and they go up, does that mean my taxes pay more into this?
If you're,
They build it at set level, it'll never go up.
I don't understand the question. What,
Say my house is worth 400,000.
yeah,
They reevaluate, they say, hey, your house is worth.
yeah,
So like mine went to a certain amount.
yep, yep. It does go up, yeah.
Will we have to keep paying more?
Yes. Well, it's it. No, the bond issue itself will be fixed. When it's issued, it's issued. The only time it will change is because we'll put an 8-year call provision on the bond. So year 9 and out, if the market is even is better, then we look at it and see if it makes sense to refund the debt.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Let me say hi. I didn't kick you off, but she said go up and.
Why are we going level debt, not level principal?
That hasn't been determined yet. Yeah, that hasn't been determined.
Well,
That level principal lowers your payments over the term so dramatically. That's the advantage the town has that nobody else has. Why aren't we taking advantage of that?
for doing it level principal?
I'm sorry, level principal would reduce your payments because principal is the same
On your interest. Yeah,
and interest goes down.
you're right.
Yeah, you'd be paying actually less interest because you're right.
Is that the direction we're going?
We haven't decided, but here, that's more of a political
Right.
decision. Because, well, the thing being is because, here's some argument. I'm not saying which way to go. It's obviously the district's decision. We'll give them the information on both sides. If we issue level principal, okay, you're gonna have a tax impact up front that's really fully loaded on millions of dollars of bonds. So you're gonna have basically the people that in the first 5 years are gonna get really hit hard on the tax rate because the debt service is gonna be higher.
May I just say that there's nothing in this about a tax increase, and that's the sad thing about this. You're gonna give us a bill for 800,000, 2 million, and ask the towns to fund it. The idea is that there is no tax increase associated with this unless we as a town do it.
Right.
If I have 300 voters who love this, come out and vote, yes, we have to find a way to pay for it. You haven't helped us pay for this at all. So all these numbers about, cost per thousand and all that, absolute disingenuous number. There's nothing connected with this that raises the tax in the town. You're just gonna send me a bill and I have to pay it. And if my voters, who I seriously doubt are gonna vote for a tax increase, don't vote for it, I'm cutting. I'm cutting services for education, council on aging, police, fire, everything else. So if this was tied to a normal debt issue structure, I'd have no issue with it. But the way this is being handled, really, is pulling one over on the voters. They're asking me
Can I?
beautiful $2 million school, and we'll figure out how to pay for it later. That's my problem with the whole process.
I don't think, excuse me, I don't think I'm misleading on this
Well,
because
we've been over it past it, or you're not misleading. We're not-
I'm not, and that's, well, if I'm sitting in, like I said, if I'm sitting in an audit, I gotta assume that most of the member towns, at least the ones I work with, I think, would go and seek a debt exclusion, okay? So I'm speaking, maybe I should make that more clear, about, yes, the towns have to now go out and try to finance this. If this passes, it's on you, understood completely. You have to find a way. You have to now go to your voters and sell it in your community for a debt exclusion. With the same argument that you're making now, cuts in services, what that, but I'm speaking to somebody watching this on TV, no matter what town, and I'm saying, if you don't do the debt exclusion, that's the impact that it will have additionally on your taxes. I don't think that's misleading. I think, I guess that's. Yep, understood, yep.
DPW, elementary school, I've left something out. But each one of those overrides in the last 11 years, the library, all of those items have costs associated with them to the voters. This has a cost to the town. So none of my voters are voting to increase their taxes when they vote on this. And that's why I don't.
Lynn, let me try to clarify a few things and maybe introduce myself, and I think I can. So, first of all, my name's Charlie, and I come in peace. I'm not from the IRS. And my last name is Lyons, and I'm actually working with Duran Whittier on this project. And I've actually worked for superintendents and school committees around the state for the last couple of years on some of the bigger vocational technical projects. I work directly with the Bristol-Plymouth School Superintendent and School Committee. I'm still working on the Northeast Vocational Technical Project, which cost about $317 million. And I work closely with the superintendent at Diamond Regional and made numerous presentations to towns and to the Mayor of Fall River and others. And I met with all the mayors in the Northeast District. And so I completely understand the frustration in your question. And I'll tell you why I understand it. I was a selectman in the town of Arlington for 24 years. And before that, I chaired the school committee, and we renovated Arlington High School back in 1977 when I was 18 at a total cost of $6.7 million. And they just completed their latest renovation for $287 million. These costs are high. And I don't think anybody's trying to minimize the impact. At least I'm not going to. And so what I'd like to do is just to explain the situation that the Tri-County School Committee and the superintendent inherited. When Dr. McGuire got this job, the school committee, through her and through Dan, the business manager, they said, we got a broken school. We need to fix it. And most of the vocational technical schools built 55 and 60 years ago are broken. And so they invited the Mass School Building Authority. They said, could you come in and tell us if we qualify for your program? And lo and behold, Mass School Building Authority, they probably had about 60 applications from throughout the state. They came here, and they were one of 13 schools that said, you know what? There are health and safety issues. This school needs to be renovated, but in order for us to give you funding, we have certain rules. First of all, the school you rebuild has to last for 50 years. And secondly, you have to look at different options. And one of the options was renovation or renovation addition. The third option was new. And through an intensive process in hiring expert consultants, they finally came up with the conclusion, the best benefit for the children and the taxpayers of this district is to build a new school. And we got to figure out how to pay for it. Now, this school district is unique. Now, let me explain to you why it's unique. Its regional agreement specifies that once a district figures out what it's going to cost to rebuild or remodel or fix up, that issue has to go to the voters first. The voters decide, and it's called the chapter and verse of the Mass General Laws is Chapter 71, Section 16N. And in the regional school agreement, it specifies that the decisions about whether to fix the school or not will be determined by the voters. And so, very specifically in the law, it specifies how the process of the election will work. And so, in this case, the district determines the date, and we've had a few meetings with town clerks, all the town clerks, I've attended both of them, and the best date to select for the vote on this, it has to be done within 120 days of the Mass School Building Authority approving the scope and budget for this project, which is planned for late this summer. And we met with the town clerks on 2 occasions, and they're all terrific, by the way. And fundamentally, they said, we don't want to have an election in 2024. We got a couple coming up that might not be nice. So 2023, which is within the 120-day period, was selected, and we looked at a few Tuesdays in October, and the best 2 Tuesdays one was October 24th, and the second one was October 31st, which I think is Halloween or something, right? And so that date was selected, and in consultation with them, because they're really the true leaders of the democratic process in the communities, the school committee here reserves the right to select under that law whether the election has to go between, it has to be the same times in the entire district, in every community, and the times have to be between 4 and 8 hours. And for a cry of democracy, the town clerk said, well, we think the 24th is the best date, but we think it should be 8 hours because it's an important issue for the voters in this district. And so the hours of 12 to 8 were selected. The law also specifies that the number of polls to be selected will be determined in consultation with the communities. And we've asked the town clerks to talk to you folks, the selectmen, the town administrators, but primarily the elected leaders, the executive leaders in the community. Now, on the Northeast project, and I work with 5 cities and 6 communities, the city of Revere had 1 poll open. The city of Chelsea, which sends 20% of the students to Northeast, had 1 poll open. Matter of fact, most of the communities had 1 polling location open. But that's up to the communities. And the law also specifies that the cost of running that election must be borne by the regional school district. And so we took a look at what it costs to run the election at Bristol Plymouth, and we took a look at what it costs to run the election at Northeast Vocational Technical. We even looked at the Minuteman cost of running the election. Minuteman did the same thing. They had to have a voter-approved approval on the project. The vote passed with 85% of the vote in the Northeast Vocational Technical District. It passed with about 57% of the vote or so, 56% in the Bristol Plymouth District. In the Diamond District, which is Fall River, Swansea, C0unty, I met with all the town administrators. Matter of fact, I know a few of you town administrators who are here from, I spent 21 years on the board of directors of the Mass Municipal Association because I was past president of the Selectmen's Association back in 2000. So I understand exactly what the concerns are. I've led debt exclusions, like you've mentioned, in overrides and that sort of thing when I was in Arlington. But here's the way the process works here. The voters are supreme. They decide, in the vote that will be put before the voters, will have, as Carl mentioned, this is the project cost that has fundamentally been approved by MSBA. And then in the vote, it will show what the MSBA grant will be. So let's assume it's $300 million, and let's assume, for the sake of discussion, that the grant's $100 million. Then the voters will vote yes or no, and the local cost would be $200 million. And as Lynn indicated, once that's approved on October 23rd, then the tough works begin. And the tough work, and I appreciate this from the managers and others, well, how are we going to pay for this over time? Now, here's what happened in the Minuteman District. In the Minuteman District, 75% of the communities said we don't need a debt exclusion for our share. They did have a debt exclusion. The Arlington Selectmen put a debt exclusion on the ballot with their own high school. It was voted the same day. and 70% of the voters voted for both projects. Matter of fact, they did 3 elementary additions the same day. But 7 of the 9 communities in the Minuteman District decided they'd had enough money in either stabilization or free cash, or they had an economic development plan. And I know there are economic development plans happening in places like North Attleboro and others, where they guesstimated, well, we're not going to have to pay a bill on this project until the debt is due. Now, whether you do what we call short-term bond anticipatory notes to start funding the first part of the project costs and architects and what have you, and then fold it into a long-term bond issue at some other point, like Lynn mentioned, that's to be determined individually by each community. But in the Northeast District, some of the communities might do a debt exclusion for their portion of the cost. And I know the city of Chelsea's annual new growth revenue, just for the sake of discussion, for the last 3 years has been going up $1.7 million a year. So every community is different. And I think Lynn, you'll permit me for saying this, and Dan will permit me for saying this, whether you do level principal or level debt is really dependent upon, at that point in time, a mature discussion about the market. The only issue before the voters is, do you approve that a tired, broken vocational technical school should be rebuilt? Do you support this project? And we're going to have to work collectively with you and try to figure out how this thing can be financed, but that's up to each individual community. And there are some communities, like they have at the Minuteman District, there are only 3 communities, I think, had debt exclusions on their portion of the cost. Now, how is the cost determined? The cost is determined by the regional school district charter, the charter. And in this regional school district, the debt is assigned on a yearly basis when the payment is due. So fundamentally, the payment, you're not going to have a payment due on this project until probably fiscal 27, okay? And then once and it's going to depend upon, the construction schedule. If the project's going to cost $300 million, let's say, the state's going to pay for $100 million of it, you're going to have to borrow $200 million, but you're not going to spend $200 million over the next 3 years. The major construction portion of the season will begin a few years from now, but the debt will be due, and it's based upon, fundamentally, your percentage of enrollment, assuming every community has at least 5 students in the district. There's one community that doesn't send 5 students to the district. For capital costs, the regional agreement clearly stipulates that any capital cost will assume a minimum of 5 students, at the school. That fundamentally buys the seats at the school for a Sherborne, so that if in 3 years from now they send 5 kids, then they're insured those seats, so to speak. So I don't think anybody here wants to rush to judgment, but the judgment is determined by the voters. The mathematical computation in terms of what's the share is determined by the regional agreement. But is there a need? Absolutely. Absolutely a need. Cape Cod Tech was built at, for 600 students. The cost came in. They got a lot less from MSBA as a percentage of the budget cost because their towns are considered a little wealthier. Northeast, because the 3 cities of Malden, Revere, and Chelsea pay for 50% of the debt service, then their support from MSBA is based upon the wealth of the community. It's judged by, according to the MSBA formula, it's actually judged based upon, value of the property as well as per capita income in the community. And so we know what it is now. We don't know what it's going to be 3 or 4 years from now. Let me give you an example. The superintendent testified along with the school board member the other day, and I think a few of the town managers testified. before the State Educational Legislative Committee, both House and Senate, and they said, we need more money to bring down the local share of this project cost on our towns. Dr. McGuire led that effort with superintendents from all over the state, vocational technical superintendents. And your school board members here all support that effort. I actually wrote part of the legislation that folks testified on. And one of the concepts we developed last year and we sent to some legislators was to, if the communities all vote for this, and we hope you do because it's needed, is to empower your town meetings without a debt exclusion for regional school debt service cost, to allow those town meetings, empower them to allow them to increase the levy limit to pay for that portion of the cost. Now, I don't know what the legislature will do with all these things, but I want you to know two things. We understand the delicacy of this situation and the fiscal impact it will have on the communities. And we will do everything we can to work with you to minimize that. And I know Dan, the business manager here, will work with Lynn. And Lynn, by the way, has got great experience all over the Commonwealth. As a matter of fact, Unibank is the financial advisor for many of your communities. There's no reason why Dan can't meet with your chief financial officers and Lynn to figure out what's the best borrowing strategy. That can happen. But the issue for the voters on October 24th, 2023, do you support this project? And I can tell you, only because my uncle Connie Lyons turned 100 years old last week, and he's living in North Attleboro, and most of his grandkids went to this school. And based upon that cookout, they're excited about supporting a new Tri-County school district to resemble what the citizens in the Northeast District, the Bristol-Plymouth District, the Cape Cod District, the Minuteman District, and many others are benefiting from. So I don't think anybody wants to rush to judgment here tonight. I simply want to let you know that the date of the election is October 24th. Your support is critically needed. And the idea of how this will be, financed over time, I think, has yet to be determined. I hope that answers some of your concerns and some of your questions. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlie. Here, you want a hand? You good?
A hand, I might need a railing.
A railing would be good, yeah. Well, that's the ADA stuff that doesn't exist in this current building. So essentially, as Charlie just pointed out, we are on the books right now with the clerks from the members sending communities for the 24th. And then at that point in time, should it be a positive vote, we would then progress. And that is how the project would progress into the next phases. So with that, I think that is the conclusion of our presentation. We really appreciate you coming out. Yeah, and we welcome some questions.
All right, before we do the questions, I just want to follow up on the legislation that Charlie had talked about, that we've been working with the towns over the last couple of years, and that we've filed with the Commonwealth. The representative from North Attleboro, Adam Scanlon, and also Senator Feeney, also from the Attleboro, along with Senator Moran from Lawrence, filed legislation on behalf of the the vocational schools, particularly the ones that are in the pipeline with MSBA right now, to try to increase the reimbursement from the MSBA. It's currently at committee. We testified on Monday. Was it Monday? The whole week's a blur. We testified on Monday at the State House. Andy Rodenheiser from Rodenheiser Plumbing was with us, Tracy from Medway, and myself. And we hope to get the reimbursement up. That's our goal. We will let the town administrators know what's going on with it, and if we can, hopefully, once it gets through that hurdle, it then goes back to the House of Representatives again. So we'll let you know if we need more letters written, but we do hope to get that because it is important for all of our communities. So yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sherry.
What if the legislation doesn't pass until after
Yeah, so it definitely, this, what they'll give us right now is what, based on what their funding mechanism is right now. But the hope and the point with the legislation is for them to go back in and readdress how they're funding our projects. So the MSBA program itself reimburses schools based on a template that they have, and the template that they have is for comprehensive schools. They don't have a program that reimburses for vocational schools, even though they cost significantly more to build. So our legislation is asking to take the VOTEC model into consideration and reimburse. But yes, we're asking them to adjust it for us. Yeah, that's the point of the whole legislation. Yeah, hi. Yes.
I don't think anybody here is really against the VOTEC. I'm a supporter of VOTEC. I'm a supporter of Tri-County. That's not the issue that I think most of us are dealing with. Most of us are dealing with how do we really fund it in our community.
Right.
So I have a series of questions I'd like to ask you to bear with me while I get my questions out. Did I miss the fact that what the reimbursement is from MSBA? If I do the calculations, it looks like it's somewhere around 28% now.
So it's the 52.8% of what's called eligible costs. And that's part of what the problem is what they cap those eligible costs at cost more here. So at the end of it, with the cap, it only ends up being about, the 28 or 26.
So the 283 you're asking us to fund is including what MSBA is anticipating. We understand that. And the other matter, when we're talking about how we're funding this, whether we're going to fund it, there's two ways we can fund this bond-wise. And you showed us the document up there that showed
Yeah.
that was a straight line, bond. Like in the town of Medway, on a straight line bond based upon the numbers
Yeah, Lynn.
you showed us here. Our participation on the straight line will be about $1,000,001 for the next 30 years. $1,000,001 for the next 30 years. I think those are the numbers you showed us there.
Correct.
That's $36. You haven't made a decision which way you're going. That's what I heard. I thought you said you're going that way, then I heard somebody else say we haven't made a decision. If you go the other way, I want to make people understand that that $36 for the town of Medway will probably jump to somewhere around $48 to $50, okay?
Up front, it will be very high, that impact, correct. You are absolutely correct.
Number 36 isn't something that somebody should run back and say, until you decide how they're going to bond this, we don't really know what the number's going to be. So when will you be making that decision? Because one of the things that I'm wrestling with, and we're all wrestling with, we need to start to talk to our community about the cost of this. We go back and we do our analysis. Do we do our analysis based upon $283,000, and which rate do we use? Because one rate
Understood.
is $1,000,001, and the other bonding rate is $1,000,005.
Correct. Understood.
You need to talk to the community about that. How long will it be before you make that decision?
Dan, do you want to speak? I mean, we're still looking at cash flow now. This project, has to be bid out, right? We don't know what the construction cost is going to come in. Probably not lower, right? Not in the environment that we've been in. We certainly haven't seen that. But we haven't even discussed what the cash flow.
We can't go back to the community and start to, we'll have to give them two examples, depending upon which way you decide to bond.
Well, I think here for this purposes here for the thing, I think you could run 1,000,000 schedules and hypotheticals here tonight and just confuse the heck out of people. So we took an assumption and we said 30-year, typically 30 years, right? Obviously for this amount of money on a level debt service, typically done for this structure of financing. Estimated a debt service rate. That's obviously very volatile. We put some other assumptions into this as far as how much money you're going to need, how long with the spending considerations. So we picked the number, 200 million. Let's give people something. I don't think it's far out of the realm, but I know for my towns, you need to budget stuff, and you know to when to prepare for that. Yep.
It's going to cost you
Yep.
around $100,000 house, right? $100,000 valuation. That's what we're looking for.
We just did that.
You haven't made the final decision, you're going to straight line it at $36. That's what I'm asking for. Because I'm not going to go out and tell my residents.
I would say most likely my discussions with the district is we're looking at 30 years on a level debt basis.
Will you have that decision made by the time of the vote, or is that decision made after the vote
It'd probably be made after the vote passes.
It has to be after the vote, because they can't borrow a penny.
We can make an estimate based on a cash flow. It's just that we're working with a very preliminary cash flow right now as far as the timing of that, when those invoices are gonna hit, when that money's gonna be out the door. So we need to fine tune that.
Dollars in my town and building, since I've been on the permanent building committee, we always knew when we went to the vote what it was gonna cost the voter. Always, every single time. So this is
Well, they're gonna know what the cost is going to be on October 24th. But are we going to lay out, you know, the absolute financing plan at that time? Probably not.
comes to an assumption, 30 years, 4.25%,
Yeah,
straight line or straight principal, that's a cost.
right.
And we just need to know that that's not gonna shift $1 million or $500,000 for you or 300, 400 for me, based on that. So that seems like a decision that can be made well ahead of time and just live with it. You know, that, you don't have to
Yes.
wait for this to pass.
And I think that's pretty much the decision right now. 30-year, a level debt.
So that's pretty much a decision. This can be a decision that can be made, and it needs to be made before October 20.
Then it will be, yeah, we'll have a decision in place as what it's going to, the amortization is gonna look like. I mean, by October 20. I know.
We looked at that number of 283. Where are we in the design? Are we 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%? Where are we?
So we're at schematic design. So schematic design. And per the state MSBA process, this is a prescribed step, as I showed you on the second slide, that we have to pin down the number on a scope of the project that is educationally based, and that's where we stand today. So this is the number, the 283, that we showed you as the project budget, which you're correct, approximately $80 million is coming from the state. It's an assumption, but we're living in, you know, some range. And so we're at the schematic design level, yes, for a fixed number.
I agree.
Yep,
I'm going to my town and talk about a $283 million project of which we're gonna be looking at roughly $200 million.
in finance side.
When the bids come in, everything at the end, all added up, comes to 3.25.
Okay, well, then we don't have a, you know, and we don't have a project unless the voters then,
You don't know the final number until after we voted for the $283 million project.
yeah, but that's all they've authorized.
We've authorized 283.
You didn't authorize 300.
Now it comes into 320.
You'd have to go back to the voters.
Again, and ask the town again to come up with additional funds.
the number that we have to live within, or we have to go back out for a vote?
Back out for
We would have to go back out
Yeah,
for a vote. So
I'm sorry.
This is the limit. We can come under it, which we hope we're coming under it. But if we bid it all out, like what just happened in other schools, and all of a sudden it's 50 million over what you thought, we would have to go back out for a vote. We would have to go back out for a vote. Yeah.
Can you tell me of the 283, I know you have furnishings and all the miscellaneous whiteboards and everything else built in. How much construction contingency is built into that number?
So we have 4% on the owner side. So outside of the construction contract, if you will, and the construction contract is coming in at $233 million. Outside of that 233, we have 4%, which off the top of my head, I want to say is roughly 8 or 9 million. It's 9 million. I'm sorry, I don't have all the numbers on the top of my head. But inside of the construction number, we have escalation, because we're not bidding this job for another 18 months or longer. We have a construction contingency on the contractor side. Percent-wise, it's 2.5%. I don't know the number off the top of my head. And escalation, I believe we are carrying 11%. And then we have design contingency within that 233 of 7%. So if you add all those together, you know, we're somewhere, I don't know, 18, 19%.
Just my simple last question is, as change year over year, and everything's based upon percentage.
So will your
All of a
cost.
sudden, our percentage goes from 9% up to 10%. Our increase would go up, and somebody's increase would probably go down if they're low. Am I reading that correctly?
Like it does now.
So every year it's going to change with the
Based upon our
the
roll.
debt that's due. Just want to make sure everything.
Yes, based
Thank
upon.
thank you for the answer, I appreciate it.
My observation is, if, it would have been nice to have it gone higher on the number, saying 58 instead of 37 for specific towns, because there is such uncertainty. It's kind of like when I was in the window treatment business and somebody said to me, when will I have my window treatment? And I'd say 6 to 8 weeks. And they go, 6 to 8 weeks? I said, well, you'd much rather me tell you 6 to 8 weeks and me come in and say it's only 4 weeks and you're going to love me. But if I tell you it's 4 weeks and it's 6 to 8, you're going to say, where the hell are my window treatments? Same thing with this. If you had presented it at a higher number, a more realistic, just as he said, it could be a million and a half instead of a million. I think there wouldn't be such, what are you telling me?
We're,
I don't think a realistic number, what you're saying is, this gentleman here was speaking to the amortization, whether it's a level debt or level principal. And as I said, we're most likely going to do a 30-year level debt. And I will offer that, between now, I certainly have discussions with the town managers and vet this through. I'd love to sit down and really talk to them about, the different scenarios and flesh this out. But what we're projecting, I think, on the interest rate on that 4.25 is a conservative rate. I could have lowballed it and gave you what the 30-year, then the numbers would have been a little less on the impact analysis. But, again, like you said, I'd rather be a little over than under.
I agree, but that's what I'm saying, on your numbers, on the towns, in the conversation, it just went that it could be $37 or it could be $58. We have to be able to tell the voters what it is.
Well,
I know, but it's gotta be decided soon.
I have a very friendly question. Will this increase enrollment at all?
No. So the question is, does it increase enrollment? So the MSBA caps our building at 1,000 kids, which is what it is right now. Now, I'll talk just a little, because you're probably going to hear a little about the state is looking at reorganizing some vocational schools because some have waiting lists of 1,000 kids, and they're asking, other schools to open up, for them. But we're not in that situation. So don't get confused if you read in the Globe that they're increasing seats. That's not us.
Do all towns have to vote for this?
No.
So the question is, do all towns have to vote for it? And it's really confusing because it would seem that that would be the way that it works, because it does in some districts. But in this district, if you picture all 11 of the communities of Tri-County together as one town, that's how the votes are counted. So it's not North Attleboro, Franklin, it's all 11 together, and they come out for that 8-hour period.
What do you wanna bring up?
And then at the end,
What are you gonna do?
50% plus one.
Yeah, let,
It varies by town, so some are $13,000, and some go to $17,000. There's a formula that the state puts out based on property value and wealth.
So I got 2 kids that went to BCC. When they coloring program opportunity, and then they have culinary, dental assisting, CNA. They're far less for 2 years, and they're going to associate's degree. So you're asking the towns to spend a lot of money where they can go to BCC, or they can go to any of those schools, the one in
So
Wellesley has automotive.
Yeah, the vocational schools, as high schools, are regional vocational schools that are
But we're asking 13-year-old kids to pick what they want to do for the rest of their life
that's
till
the
they're
nature
70.
of a vocational school. That's
It's been that way since 1977.
30,000 students in the Commonwealth.
They, at the 10-year mark,
Let me-
how many kids? Do you have W-2s for graduates that are still in the
Yeah,
trade?
there aren't follow-up studies that are done.
Do you have them?
I don't have to look at it now, but that's one of the things that.
I'm not knocking vocational
here because there wasn't enough room. Let me clarify 2 points and I'm done. And first of all, it's important to understand, it's a district-wide vote. So if it passes 501 votes to 500 votes, it passes. That's done, just so everybody understands. It's not based upon community by community. And that's exactly what happened both in the Bristol-Plymouth district and exactly what happened in the Northeast district, okay? The second point I want to make, in Karen's original plea, let me give you an example of why writing your legislators, how do you get these costs down, okay? Hopefully, you get inflation down and keep it down to a, you know, so it doesn't have a major impact. Like as Lynn said, she'd been very conservative. She didn't want to come in here with lowball assumptions in terms of interest. But the second thing is, write your legislators and ask them to support more funding for expensive construction cost in vocational technical schools. Let me give you 2 examples of how MSBA treats equipment in technology. They provide $1,200 per pupil to an elementary school for equipment and $1,200 per pupil to a vocational technical school for equipment, and $1,200 in its formulas for technology for an elementary school, and the same amount for technology for vocational technical schools. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that because there's more steel and there's more infrastructure in facilities like this that are training the future technicians and craftsmen for the next generation, that the buildings alone, in terms of wire, equipment, cement, cost more money. And so we're trying to get the state to recognize that. So please communicate to your legislators. There's 2 ways we can keep this project down to our local taxpayers. The first way is for the state to put more funding into the MSBA for vocational technical schools. And that's what I know the superintendent and her colleagues are doing, and we'll continue to do that. And I think the important message you want to leave from here today is how the financing is going to work is yet to be determined, because they first have to get authorization from the voters to actually consider the borrowing. And that important decision is on October 24th, and we hope you can all support that. Thank you.
Okay, and Stanley? Oh, right, we have 3. Okay, go ahead.
Do you have the cost per town, not by household, by in the aggregate?
Yes, Dan has the sheet that he'll hand to the select people. Yeah, so. Yeah, he has that up here, yeah. Oh, that was your question? Oh, really? I thought you were going to, like, I thought you were going to get, all right, go ahead, Stanley.
I think everybody in the room has to realize that it's gonna cost you no matter what, because if all of a sudden they have to do the remodeling,
Yeah, so that's part,
X amount of dollars, you're gonna spend $300 million, and you're gonna get $100 million, or you're gonna spend $200 million, and you're gonna get nothing.
right, so that's part of the problem.
I don't think anyone's disputing the fact that money has to be spent. I think the fact is, each town.
You think so?
Oh, God, yes. And,
I might be the oldest one in the room.
you could be, who knows? But the fact is, the senior population is getting older and older.
So there are right now 9 vocational, there are only 28 regional vocational schools in the Commonwealth. And there are 9 of them currently in the MSBA pipeline, and that impacts 119 communities. And of those 119 communities, I would almost guarantee that at least 90% of them have something else going on, whether it's a high school, an elementary school, a police station, fire station, council on aging. And so, yes, so we know that. We're not just saying, build the school, deal with it, right? We're trying the best that we can on the state and national level. I was down in Washington, D.C. in March to try to shake the trees there with the money that they're going to claw back from all of the relief funding that people didn't spend to put it back to the schools in these areas to just build these regional schools and just take care of them. You know, people that have heard me speak before know that I live in Carver. Our community supports Old Colony. Old Colony is also in the MSBA pipeline, but they're 2 years behind us. And if my math is the way that, you know, I think that it works, it's every 2 or 3 years, it goes up by $100 million. So my town is looking at a $400 million project with 500 kids. There are only 500 kids in that school. So look at that impact at my town of Carver, which is half the population of these towns, right? So I understand from a taxpayer standpoint what it looks like too, which is why we're trying to do what we can. Mr. Boynton? We've been having this conversation, you and I have, and your town administrator, Mr. Borg, was with us on Monday when we testified, and he expressed on behalf of the town administrators in the 11 towns what the concern is to the committee. So, and I'll tell you, I've been, involved in vocational education for really my whole life. This is only my second year at Tri-County, but I was at Southeastern for 23 years before here. So this is not new to me. But I've not heard the support for vocational schools on Capitol Hill like I heard this year in my whole 23 years before. They're talking about plans for and the need for these schools. So hopefully we get somewhere. But we do have to work together to do it. We do. We absolutely do. Yeah. So we asked for two things. Well, we asked for like 6 things in the bill, but one of the things that we asked for initially was $3 billion from the millionaire's tax to be allocated for like a trust fund. The state has trust funds for all kinds of things. So we asked if they would establish that for vocational school building projects. So that's one piece of it. Then the other piece is to increase that MSBA reimbursement 75%, or like a sliding scale up to 90%. Yeah. So there are 2 different pieces for the funding. Yeah.
The bill numbers are 538 for it's number 538 for the House and 274 with Feeney for the Senate. I can tell you, based on what Karen just said, I don't think it's too late for you to write the Education Committee, and I'm glad to help anybody navigate the website on how to send those emails. My daughter's here as a junior. I'm a graduate of 1991. My parents are 72 and 78 and live in Medway. And the discussion in our own household is, it is a lot of money to a lot of people. And I volunteer at our local food pantry. So I think, like you, I'm seeing it across the board. The select board and I have spoken, and it's a very challenging situation. But as it was just said, it's also a necessity, because if it doesn't pass, there's a huge price tag that I believe wouldn't be bonded. So we really need to consider that in how we all come together and just write your legislators, tell them the impact it's going to put on your community.
So just so you know, Senator Roush supports the legislation. She came for a tour, and she's a supporter of and a co-sponsor of this legislation. Senator Feeney, of course. And then we have Jeff Roy was one. The list goes on and on. So most of our representatives and senators, Garlick, she's also on the Education Committee, so that's good. And Rebecca Roush is on the Education Committee, so that's good. So we do have some momentum with them, but we'll see. We'll see. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you all coming out to hear us and see our presentation. And now I'm going to have a martini.